Hello there, welcome back to the channel. This is Nerd World, continuing the exploration of the different fleets of the Romulan and Klingon navies. Today we're looking at the Romulan Warbirds circa 2399. These vessels were not operated by the Romulan Star Empire, not exactly anyway. Before we get started, please like, share, subscribe and comment down below, and disclaimer, if you've not seen Star Trek Picard, spoilers. Also, we don't have a fun ton of information about these ships, unlike the Diderotix class or even the Valdora class, which we have some information for. We have very little depictions of these vessels, and although the Federation's relationship with the Romulan Free State does seem to be better than that of the Romulan Empire, we still know practically nothing about these ships yet. So there may be a future video on this one day. Right now, here we go. There are two known variants of the Romulan Warbird, primarily being used by the so-called Romulan Free State. This was what formed in the wake of the Hoburs star eruption, which destroyed the Romulan homeworld and basically caused the collapse of the Romulan Empire, spreading them out across several small colonies, which sort of loosely realigned into the Romulan Free State. Due to political changes, mostly instigated by Ambassador Spock, and other such things, this would eventually lead to reunification with their Vulcan cousins, and all of them living on Vulcan and renaming the planet, etc. But for now, we're not there yet. We're still at the stage of the Romulan Free State. These vessels were seen guarding the artifact, as it was known, which was a polite way of saying captured Borg cube filled with lots of dead cybernetic zombies. Sort of dead. The vessels themselves are clearly distinctly Romulan. Going with the first and most common of the two vessels, they are very bird-like. In some ways, they are, forgive the word use, more of a primitive design than vessels that have come before them. They are also notably substantially smaller than previous generations of Romulan ship. Now, it should be noted the Romulans did seem to be moving towards smaller starships in general, but the Romulans have always been known to build big. In the 23rd century, they did build smaller, as they did in the 22nd, but there seemed to be a progression from the bird of prey to the battle cruiser and onwards to the warbird as the vessels just got bigger and bigger and bigger. And then it culminated with the Diderotix class, and then the Valdor class was smaller. But then again, we don't know that the Valdor class was meant to be a full replacement for the Diderotix. These ships are smaller still, comparable in size to Starfleet vessels, as we know Starfleet tends to build smart, not big. So these vessels are basically smaller, and this is probably a reflection of the depleted resources, military assets, and capabilities of the Romulan Free State. It may also explain why the vessel is a more simplistic design and much more overtly bird-like. All Romulan vessels, from the Romulan bird of prey through to the warbird, have a bird motif of some kind, whether it's just bird painted on the hull, Aztecing of the hull to make it seem feathered, or general silhouette of the ship to appear more bird-like. These vessels very much look like a bird, with an obvious tail, wings and beak-like structure on the vessel. So yeah, they kind of look more primitive, but we can assume that the base technology behind them is at least comparable to what the Romulans were using a few years earlier, if not more advanced. I'm going to say, with the destruction of their homeworld and the scattering of their people, their technology is probably stagnated just a little bit, but that is supposition. Exactly how big these ships are, not sure, but they do appear to be similar to an Inquiry class starship, maybe a bit smaller and probably less powerful. The exact capabilities of the ship are also unknown, but we can make some educated guesses. The Romulans built these ships as warships, probably dedicated, stripped them down, very, very basic ships. These vessels are built more along the Klingon lines of construction, as is my interpretation of the design. They are more basic, more stripped down, more unifunctional. So they're built for one task now. They're not built to be generalists like the old Diderotix class. These are warships, pure and simple fighters, and nothing more. They're only demonstrated and known to be armed with disruptors. That's not to say they don't carry torpedoes, but it is possible that the Romulans abandoned, at least temporarily, the use of torpedoes due to resources. They do build a lot of these ships, however, so that may be a questionable statement, but it's not known that they carry anything other than disruptors. The other variant of this design is so-called O's Warbird. Now this ship is slightly bigger and a slightly different design to the other vessels. It's no difference in terms of armament, but does have a more menacing appearance, but still conforms to many of the basic bird-like structures. It does appear to be better armoured and a more sturdy structural design, and of course all these vessels carry cloaking devices and shields as standard. But other than that, there's not really many advantages. Aesthetically though, O's Warbird is larger, it probably has a larger crew complement, it has probably got greater tactical capabilities than the other vessels of the fleet, being the flagship. They would have put more effort into its construction, but again, supposition. We don't know that for concrete. The prow of the vessel though is interesting. Rather than being distinctly bird-like, it has a more Centurion sort of look to it. And what I mean by that is, if you look at the helmets that Romulans wore back in the 23rd century, the front axe of this vessel is vaguely reminiscent of the helmet design worn by Romulan soldiers in the mid-23rd century. This is likely a deliberate callback to their cultural predecessors. And the Romulans are big on symbolism, so there could be something to that. A number of these vessels, as I said, we seem to be guarding the artifact. They were later used in an effort by the I've tried pronouncing this. The Jakvash. Terrible pronunciations. Most of the vessels, though, were headed up by the Tal Shiar. But the Zakvash were controlling the Tal Shiar, and they got control of this fleet, and they used them to try and wipe out the synths and stop, a robot apocalypse. Hundreds of these vessels entered the system and were confronted by an equally large Starfleet armada, which was obviously more powerful than them. The Romulans withdrew, and we never really got much of a feel for what these vessels could have accomplished in combat. But clearly the Romulans were pretty confident in them to build so many of them. And unfortunately that's pretty much all we know. There's not much else. Base technologies, transporters, probably got replicators on board. There isn't much more to it. The thing I get sort of stuck on looking at them, O's Warbird I really like. I'm not a big fan of the design of the more general type. Oh, by the way, we don't know the classifications of these ships or their names, much like with the Valdor class. Again, considering the Federation's closer association with the Romulan Free State and other Romulan remnants, you'd think they would have gathered a bit more information. But we don't have it. I'm not a big fan of the more generalist design. I like the Romulan aesthetic in general, and I like the fact that they use the sort of symbolism of a bird very heavily in their design aesthetic. However, this vessel goes head on into that design so thoroughly that I think it's almost cartoonish, lower decks. But it is what it is. It's not a bad design. It's clearly a reflection of the times for the Romulans, and who's going to judge them? I mean, you put an engine on a brick, it'll fly in space. Doesn't have to be aesthetic, doesn't have to look nice. We can also assume the bird-like design perhaps helps the vessel in adverse conditions, whether that be unusual spatial phenomena allowing the vessel to operate a little more efficiently. And what I mean by that is sort of the concept of aerodynamics perhaps coming into play under certain environments in space, or perhaps if the vessel was to enter a planetary atmosphere of some description, perhaps again a bird-like design would help it glide or fly or make an emergency landing. But I think I'm stretching there. I think it's purely Romulan symbolism.
I just want to take this moment to thank you for watching that video. If you liked what you saw, please check out my social links in the description box below to Instagram and Twitter and others, and also is down there a link to my Patreon page where you can support this channel and the others as I try to grow this franchise and do this more regularly. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, thank you for watching, and bye bye.